Samsy. Story time with Ronnie. Hey guys. Journey to the center of the earth. Part 22 for us. What are we doing? We're going to continue making our way into Mesa. I think this is going to be the end of this 3-hour-long video that we broke on up. All right, where are we at? We just outside of Fountain Hills there. We just went past the Saguaro Lake turnoff, and we're gonna go past Fountain Hills and the garbage dump, and we'll turn it into Mesa there. So we'll just let her go. And that temperature there, that gauge view right there is still, as we're going up Mount Ord there, I can still see I got my 4-ways on, and 113, and you'll see it change as we get closer into Mesa on that view. It'll get up to 120 degrees, and you're like, oh my God, why are we doing this? Go back, turn back now. Okay, well, here we go. Let's do a little recap and see where we at with this story. Now the boys, they had found their water, and they were making they were doing a lot of trekking. They weren't making a lot of downward progress, and the professor, he was getting a little unhappy about the whole thing, and they was about to receive a rather startling surprise. Under our feet there opened a horrible well. My uncle was so delighted that he actually clapped his hands as he saw how steep and sharp was the descent. "Aha!" he cried in rapturous delight. "This will take us a long way. Look at the projections of the rock. Ha!" he exclaimed. "It's a fearful staircase." Hans, however, who, in all our trouble, had never given up the ropes, took care so to dispose of them as to prevent any accidents. Our descent then began. I dare not call it a perilous descent, for I was already too familiar with that sort of work to look upon it as anything but a very ordinary affair. This well was a kind of narrow opening in the massive granite, of the kind known as a fissure. The contraction of the terrestrial scaffolding, then it suddenly cooled, had been evidently the cause. If it had ever served in former times as a kind of funnel through which passed the eruptive masses vomited by Snuffles, I was at a loss to explain how it had left no mark. We were, in fact, descending a spiral, something like those winding staircases in use in modern houses. We were compelled every quarter of an hour or thereabouts to sit down in order to rest our legs. Our calves ached when we seated ourselves on some projecting rocks with our legs hanging over, and gossiped while we ate a mouthful, drinking still from the pleasantly warm running stream which had not deserted us. It is scarcely necessary to say that in this curiously shaped fissure, the Hansbach had become a cascade to the detriment of its size. It was still, however, sufficient, and more for our wants. Besides, we knew that as soon as the declivity ceased to be so abrupt, the stream must resume a peaceful course. Let's take a look at this drive. I'm starting to make up my own words again. Oh yeah, we're closing in on the garbage dump. At this moment, it reminded me of my uncle, his impatience and rage, while when it flowed more peacefully, I pictured to myself the placidity of the Icelandic guide. During the whole of 2 days, the 13th, and 14th of July, we followed the extraordinary spiral staircase of the fissure, penetrating 2 leagues further into the crust of the earth, which placed us 5 leagues below the level of the sea. On the 15th, however, at 12 o'clock in the day, the fissure suddenly assumed a much more gentle slope, still trending in a southeast direction. The road now became comparatively easy, and at the same time, dreadfully monotonous. It would have been difficult for matters to have turned out otherwise. Our peculiar journey had no chance of being diversified by landscape and scenery. At all events, such was my idea. Alright, let's take a look. See what's happening. Not a whole lot. Not a whole lot exciting. No. It is what it is, guys. Hot. Alright, here we go. Oh boy, I see the end of the chapter. Maybe we can get it. At all events, such was my idea. At length, on Wednesday, the 17th, we were actually 7 leagues, 21 miles below the surface of the earth, and 50 leagues distant from the mountain of Sneffels. Though, if the truth be told, we were very tired. Our health had resisted all suffering and was in a most satisfactory state. Our traveler's box of medicaments, it does say that, okay, had not even been opened. My uncle was careful to note every hour the indications of the compass, of the manometer, and of the thermometer, all which he afterwards published in his elaborate physio... oh boy, let's see if we can pull that one out. Philosophical, there it is, and scientific account of our remarkable voyage. He was therefore able to give an exact relation of the situation. When therefore he informed me that we were 50 leagues in a horizontal direction distant from our starting point, I could not suppress a loud exclamation. Ah, there's Mountain Hills right there. What is the matter now? Cried my uncle. Nothing very important. Only an idea has entered my head, was my reply. Well, out with it, my boy. It is my opinion that if your calculations are correct, we are no longer under Iceland. Do you think so? We can very easily find out, I replied, pulling out the map and a compass. You see, I said, after careful measurement, that I am not mistaken. We are far from Cape Portland, and those 50 leagues to the southwest will take us into the open sea. Under the open sea, cried my uncle, rubbing his hands with delighted air. Yes, I cried, no doubt old ocean flows over our head. Well, my dear boy, what can be more natural? Do you not know that in the neighborhood of Newcastle there are coal miners which have been worked far out under the sea? Now my worthy uncle, the professor, no doubt regarded this discovery as a very simple fact, but to me the idea was by no means a pleasant one, and yet when one came to think the matter over seriously, what mattered it whether the plains and the mountains of the Iceland were suspended over our devoted heads, or the mighty billows of the Atlantic Ocean? The whole question rested on the solidity of the granite roof above us. However, I soon got used to the idea, for the passage, now level, now running down, and still always to the southeast, kept going deeper and deeper into the profound abysses of Mother Earth. 3 days later, on the 20th day of July, On a Saturday, we reached a kind of vast grotto. My uncle here paid Hans his usual Rix dollars, and it was decided that the next day should be a day of rest. Whew. That's the end of chapter 21. Chapter 22. Sunday below ground. Alright. Let's stop goofing around here for a half a mo. Take a look at this drive. I see we's at the stoplight there, just waiting to melt. And I'm sure we'll get to the melting part soon enough. Alright. Chapter 22. Sunday below ground. I awoke on Sunday morning without any sense of hurry and bustle attendant on an immediate departure. Though the day to be devoted to repose and reflection was spent under such strange circumstances and in so wonderful a place, the idea was a pleasant one. Besides, we all began to get used to this kind of existence. I had almost ceased to think of the sun, of the moon, of the stars, of the trees, houses, and towns. In fact, about any terrestrial necessities in our peculiar position. We were far above such reflections. The grotto was a vast and magnificent hall. Along its granite soil, the stream flowed placidly and pleasantly. So great a distance was it now from its fiery source that its water was scarcely lukewarm and could be drunk without delay or difficulty. After a frugal breakfast, the professor made up his mind to devote some hours to putting his notes and calculations in order. In the first place, he said, I have a good many to verify and prove, in order that we may know our exact position. I wish to be able, on our return to the upper regions, to make a map of our journey, a kind of vertical section of the globe, which will be, as it were, the profile of the expedition. That would indeed be a curious work, Uncle. But can you make your observations with anything like certainty and precision? I can. I have never, on one occasion, failed to note with great care the angles and slopes. I am certain as to having made no mistake. Take the compass and examine how she points. I looked at the instrument with care. East 1/4, southwest, southeast. Very good, resumed the professor, noting the observation and going through some rapid calculations. I make out that we have journeyed 250 miles from the point of our departure. Then, the mighty waves of the Atlantic are rolling over our heads. Certainly, and at this very moment, it is possible that fierce tempests are raging above, and that men and ships are battling against the angry blast just over our heads. It is quite within the range of possibility, rejoined my uncle, smiling. And that whales are playing in shoals, thrashing the bottom of the sea, the roof of our adamantine prison. Be quite at rest at that point. There is no danger of their breaking through. But to return to our calculations, we are to the southwest, 250 miles from the base of Snessels, and, according to my preceding notes, I think we have gone 16 leagues in a downward direction. 16 feet, I cried. I'm sure of it. But that is the extreme limit allowed by science for the thickness of the Earth's crust, I replied, referring to my geological studies. I do not contravene that assertion? He was he was quiet to answer. Quiet to answer, I guess. Eh? At this stage of our journey, according to all known laws of the increase of heat, there should be here a temperature of 1500 degrees of Raomir. There should be, you say, my boy. In which case, this granite would not exist, but be in a state of fusion. But you perceive, my boy, that it is not so, and that facts, as usual, are very stubborn things, overruling all theories. I am forced to yield to the evidence of my senses, but I am nevertheless very much surprised. What heat does the thermometer really indicate? Continued the philosopher. 27 6/10. So that science is wrong by 1474 degrees and 4/10, according to which it is demonstrated that the proportional increase in temperature is an exploded error. Humphrey Davy here shines forth in all his glory. He is right, and I have acted wisely to believe him. Have you any answer to make to this statement? Had I chosen to have spoken, I might have said a great deal. I in no way admitted the theory of Humphrey Davy. I still held out for the theory of proportional heat, increase of heat, though I did not feel it. I was far more willing to allow that this chimney of extinct volcano was covered by lava in a kind of refractory to heat. In fact, a bad conductor, which did not allow the great increase of temperature to percolate through its sides. The hot water jet supported my view of the matter. But, without entering in a long and useless discussion, or seeking for new arguments to controvert my uncle, I contented myself with taking up facts as they were. Well, sir, I take for granted that all your calculations are correct, but allow me to draw from them a rigorous and definite conclusion. Go on, my boy, have your say, cried my uncle, good-humoredly. At the place where we are now are, under the latitude of Iceland, the terrestrial depth of about 1,583 leagues. 1,583 and a quarter. Well, suppose we say 1,600 in round numbers. Now, out of a voyage of 1,600 leagues, we have completed 16. As you say, what then? At the expense of a diagonal journey of no less than 85 leagues. Exactly. We have been 20 days about it. Exactly 20 days. Now, 16 is the 100th part of our contemplated expedition. If we go on in this way, we shall be 2,000 days. That is about 5.5 years going down. The professor folded his arms, listened, but did not speak. Without counting that if a vertical descent of 16 leagues costs us a horizontal of 85, we shall have to go about 8,000 leagues to the southeast, and we must therefore come out somewhere in the circumference long before we can hope to reach the center. Bother your calculations, cried my uncle in one of his old rages. On what basis do they rest? How do you know that this passage does not take us direct to the end we require? Moreover, I have in my favor, fortunately, a precedent. What I have undertaken to do another has done, and he having succeeded, why should I not to be equally successful? I hope indeed you will, but still, I suppose I may be allowed to— You are allowed to hold your tongue, cried Professor Hardwigg, when you talk so unreasonably as this. I saw at once that the old professor was still alive in my uncle, and fearful to rouse his angry passions, I dropped the unpleasant subject. Now then, he explained, consult the manometer. What does that indicate? A considerable amount of pressure. Very good. You see, then, that by descending slowly and by gradually accustoming ourselves to the density of this lower atmosphere, we shall not suffer. Let's take a peek. Let's just take a peek. Oh, I know. We turned off the road there, the 87, and we's on the garbage dump road. So yeah, we'll just connect up here, and then we'll get back on the 202. And I finally remembered what that thing was called. There's the Red Mountain 202 east and west, and then there's the Santan 202. And I'm pretty sure it's east and west too. I don't know. Anyway, it's over that way, and that one's over that way. That's the kind of thing. You go to old Charlie's Red Barn and turn right. Okay, so we shall not suffer. Well, I suppose not, except it may be a certain amount of pain in the ears, was my rather grim reply. That, my dear boy, is nothing, and you will easily get rid of that source of discomfort by bringing the exterior air into communication with the air contained in your lungs. Perfectly, said I, for I had quite made up my mind in no wise to contradict my uncle. I should fancy almost that I should experience a certain amount of satisfaction in making a plunge into this dense atmosphere. Have you taken note of how wonderfully sound it is propagated? How wonderfully sound is propagated? Of course I have. There can be no doubt that a journey into the interior of the earth would be an excellent cure for deafness. Ha ha! But then, uncle, I ventured mildly to observe, this density will continue to increase. Yes, according to a law which, however, is scarcely defined. It is true that the intensity of weight will diminish just in proportion to the depth to which we go. What? Alright, let's take a peek at this thing again. Let's peel it back. Peel this band-aid back here, and let's reapply it. Here we go. Yes, according to a law, which, however, is scarcely defined, it is true that the intensity of weight will diminish just in proportion to the depth to which we go. You know very well that it is on the surface of the earth that its action is most powerfully felt, while, on the contrary, at the very center of the earth, bodies cease to have any weight at all. I know that is the case, but as we progress, will not the atmosphere finally assume the density of water? I know it. When placed under the pressure of 710 atmospheres, cried my uncle, with imperturbable gravity? And when we are still lower down? I asked, with natural anxiety. Well, lower down, the density will become even greater still. Then how shall we be able to make our way through this atmospheric fog? Well, my worthy nephew, we must ballast ourselves by filling our pockets with stones, said Professor Hardwick. Ha ha! Faith, uncle, you have an answer for everything, was my only reply. I begin to feel that it was unwise in me to go any further into the wide field of hypotheses, for I should certainly have revived some difficulty, or rather impossibility, that would have enraged the professor. It was evident, nevertheless, that the air under a pressure which might be multiplied by thousands of atmospheres would end by becoming perfectly solid, and that then, admitting our bodies resisted the pressure, we should have to stop, in spite of all of the reasonings in the world. Facts overcome all arguments. But I thought it best not to urge this argument. My uncle would simply have quoted the example of Saknussemm, supposing the learned Icelander's journey ever really to have taken place. There was one simple answer to be made. In the 16th century, neither the barometer nor the manometer had been invented. How, then, could Saknussemm have been able to discover when he did reach the center of the earth? What now? How, then, could Saknussemm have been able to discover when he did reach the center of the earth? This unanswerable and learned objection I, however, kept to myself, and, bracing up my courage, awaited the course of events, little aware of how adventurous yet were to be the incidents of our remarkable journey. The rest of this day of leisure and repose was spent in calculation and conversation. I made it a point to agree with the professor in everything, but I envied the perfect indifference of Hans, who, without talking of any such trouble about the cause and effect, went blindly onwards wherever destiny chose to lead them. That's the end of chapter 22. Let's take a look here, because I can see that we's on the 202 Red Mountain 202. Okay, let's get on with chapter 23. Alone. Oh, I remember this part. Oh boy. Are you sure we want to start this? Oh yeah, okay, let's do it. Alright, Harry. It must in all truth be confessed, things as yet had gone on well, and I should have acted in bad taste to have complained. If the true medium of our difficulties did not increase, it was within the range of possibility that we might ultimately reach the end of our journey. Then what glory would be ours! I began, in the newly aroused ardor of my soul, to speak enthusiastically to the professor. Well, was I serious? The whole state in which we existed was a mystery, and it was impossible to know whether or not I was in earnest. For several days after our memorable halt, the slopes became more rapid. Some were even of the most frightful character, almost vertical, so that we were forever going down into the solid interior mass. During some days, we actually descended 1.5 leagues, even 2 leagues, towards the center of the earth. The descents were sufficiently perilous, and while we were engaged in them, we learned fully to appreciate the marvelous coolness of our guide Hans. Without him, we should have been wholly lost. The grave and impassible Icelander devoted himself to us with the most incomprehensible sang-froid. It's in italics. Well, just leave it there. Sang-froid. And ease. And, thanks to him, many a dangerous pass was got over, where, but for him, we should inevitably have stuck fast. His silence increased every day. I think that we began to be influenced by this particular trait in his character. It is certain that the inanimate objects by which you are surrounded have a direct action on the brain. It must be that a man who shuts himself up between 4 walls must lose the faculty of associating ideas and words. How many persons condemned to the horrors of solitary confinement have gone mad simply because the thinking faculties have lain dormant? During the 3 weeks that followed our last interesting conversation, there occurred nothing worthy of being especially recorded. I have, while writing these memoirs, taxed my memory in vain for one incident of travel during this particular period. But the next event to be related is terrible indeed. Its very memory even now makes my soul shudder and my blood run cold. It was on the 7th of August. Our constant and successive descents had taken us quite 30 leagues into the interior of the earth. That is to say that there were above us 30 leagues, nearly 100 miles of rocks and oceans and continents and towns, to say nothing of living inhabitants. We were in a southeasterly direction about 200 leagues from Iceland. On that memorial day, the tunnel had begun to assume an almost horizontal course. It was on this occasion, walking on in front, my uncle had charge of one of the roof coils. I had possession of the other. By means of its light, I was busy examining the different layers of granite. I was completely absorbed in my work. Suddenly, halting, turning around, I found I was alone. Well, thought I to myself, I have certainly been walking too fast, or else Hans and my uncle have stopped to rest. The best thing I can do is go back and find them. Luckily, there is very little ascent to tire me. I accordingly retraced my steps, and while doing so, walked for at least a quarter of an hour. Rather uneasy, I paused and looked eagerly around. Not a living soul. I called aloud. No reply. My voice was lost amid the myriad cavernous echoes it aroused. I began for the first time to feel seriously uneasy. A cold shiver shook my whole body, and perspiration, chill and terrible, burst upon my skin. I must be calm, I said, speaking aloud as boys whistle to drive away fear. There can be no doubt that I shall find my companions. There cannot be two roads. It is certain that I was considerably ahead. All I have to do is go back. Having come to this determination, I ascended the tunnel for at least a half an hour, unable to decide if I had ever seen certain landmarks before. Every now and then I paused to discover if any loud appeal was made to me, well knowing that in that dense and intensified atmosphere I should hear it a long way off. But no, the most extraordinary silence reigned in this immense gallery. Only the echoes of my own footsteps could be heard. Oh boy, oh boy. Alright, let's take a look at this drive. I got a feeling I can see where we're at.
Yep. Alright, let's wrap this thing up. Thanks so much for coming along, and we'll catch you next time. We'll get a little further down the road. Poor Harry, he done got lost. Sam, see. And we'll just give you just a few moments of the big old Rosie. How do you like that temperature? Ha ha. Okay, Rosie, you go get 'em, girl.